Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, and thank you for joining this webinar on how publishers can increase data-driven ad revenue. I'm Mindy Chahal, Head of Content at DIGIDAY Media, and before we get started, I just want to give you a few details on the structure of today's session. So over the course of this webinar, we'll be discussing some of the biggest findings from two reports, where in partnership with Permutive, we uncovered publisher challenges with selling with data. There'll be a bit more on that later, but following the discussion, we'll have some time for Q&A, but please don't wait to the end to submit your questions. You can add them at any point during the session through the questions tab on the GoToWebinar platform. Pop them in there and we'll get to as many as possible later on. So just a reminder, everyone registered will also get a recording of this webinar in their inbox, should you miss anything or want to revisit any part of the conversation. Both reports are also available online. Just go to digiday.com and search for Data Matters. Okay, let's do some introductions. The voices you'll be hearing today belong to Josh Peters, Director of Data Partnerships at BuzzFeed, and Alexandra Bannerman, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Permutive. It's great to have you both with us today.
Yeah,
so Josh, it would be great to give the listeners a bit of background to your role and BuzzFeed itself, just in case anyone's not aware.
Sure. So BuzzFeed is one of the largest publishers in the world with well over 100 million uniques a month. And my position specifically is Director of Data Partnerships. So I oversee all of the global audience strategy. I oversee everything that we do with data transfers with clients and research vendors and anything around the usage of our first party data. I also oversee all the partnerships with our data vendors in the area of third party. And I also oversee the technology that we use for that collection. So like Permutive.
Great. And Alexandra, can you do the same for yourself, please? Just to tell us a bit about Permutive and your role.
Sure, thanks, Mindy. My name's Alexandra, and I work in product marketing at Permutive. Just to give you a bit of information about us, we offer a next generation data management platform, and it harnesses the speed and the scale and the privacy benefits of edge processing technology. We were actually born out of Y Combinator in 2014, and we've basically grown up in the climate of GDPR, which means that our DMP has been built from the ground up with privacy in mind. We're really publisher focused, and we spend lots of time working with our customers on their data strategies. But at the moment, we operate in the US and Europe, and we work with publishers like BuzzFeed, Immediate Media, Financial Times, Mail Online, and Business Insider.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you both. Now let's get started. Over to you, Alexandra, for some context overview and starting the discussion.
Thanks, Mindy. I'm going to start with a bit of context for our listeners on the call today. In early 2019, Permutive conducted some research alongside DigiDay on the state of the publisher industry. We actually found that over a quarter of publishers were finding it difficult to leverage and monetize their data, which is pretty significant. To dig a little bit deeper into this, we actually spoke to publishers and media buyers more recently to find out what they're seeing in the market and also what they're doing to drive success. One of those publishers that we spoke to was BuzzFeed, so it's a real pleasure to have Josh with us on the call today to provide some of that insight firsthand.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Okay, let's look at some of the findings of that research and uncover some things that publishers can do to increase their data-driven ad revenue. It's probably no surprise to anyone that tackling life beyond the cookie is first on our list here.
Yeah, changes from Safari and Firefox have reshaped this industry in a way that media is bought and sold.
Right, I completely agree. And now Chrome is moving in the same direction. The reality of life after third-party cookies is really hitting home for a lot of people. We actually heard at a recent event that some publishers out there are just resigned now to waiting for Google to reveal its whole plan for the industry. And some other publishers are worried about browsers using this whole period of change to start taking greater control over that industry. Josh, are these concerns that you share as well?
I don't think it's time for fear, really, but more opportunity. It's a good time to sit back and just waiting. Sitting back and waiting just leaves you behind others who are being proactive. Similarly, those who are dancing around the regulations and trying to hack around the browsers are wasting time as well. Google and Apple have a lot of resources at their disposal, and they've shown that they can fix issues really quickly, time and time again. So that's all wasted time that could be spent coming up with better ways to work in the new marketplace instead of wasting it trying to skirt the red.
All right, I completely agree, Josh, with what you're saying. I think the good thing is that some publishers are finding more positive ways to move past the impact of cookie blocking. We actually saw that with Immediate Media, who told us that ITP had initially lost them between 30 and 40% of eCPMs across Safari, but that this had prompted them to actually look at ways that they could work without the use of cookies. So, Josh, I'm actually really curious as to whether BuzzFeed has been looking into similar alternatives like this or not.
Yeah, we started looking into what we could do about the future without third-party segments or cookies about 2 years ago when we started looking at upgrading our audience collection tech, aka our DMP. And that was one of the criteria on our RFI, and it helped narrow the field very quickly. So yeah, it hasn't really affected us too much because we've been very proactive in this arena.
Right, yeah, that's a good example of publishers taking things into their own hands. At Permutive, we've also seen some of our other publishers set themselves up really well, well enough for their revenue to increase for each ITP release because their own first-party data, their own really good quality first-party data would actually grow in demand.
We've seen similar demand increasing for our first-party data, and we've been making big strides in moving as much of the audiences and demand that we had in some of the third-party audiences over to first-party as possible.
Cool. That's really great to hear. On another note, we did actually hear of some agencies moving spend away from Safari and Firefox, which of course could impact publishers. Max Jaffe at Group M explained to us that the lack of data in these environments affects attribution and therefore changes their priorities when their clients are focused on measurement. But the good news is that Group M also said that they're making really big steps to working towards working with publishers directly again. And they want to collaborate with publishers and find solutions to the anti-tracking problem. Is this the kind of willingness that you've been seeing in the market, Josh?
Yeah, collaborating with media buyers, willingness to buy and sell side. There's big demand for first-party data. We're seeing everything take a big uptick in the brands, in the agencies, in everybody who wants to talk about what we can do with our data and what we have, our capabilities, and how we can work together to hit their goals. I think this is a good bridge between some of those gaps that we've had in the past between brands and agency and publisher. And I really think this is going to start help, lessen those gaps in between everyone.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think these are all really positive signs for the future. And while third-party tracking has been the status quo for a really long time, the industry is now changing faster than it ever has before. I mean, I really like this quote from you, Josh, because it's almost inspirational. It seems like you've got a really positive view of the ecosystem changing. Is that the case?
Absolutely. I know it's a little chaotic right now, and it's easy to get caught up in the panic, but at the end of the day, I feel like this was needed, and it's been a long time coming. The browser changes and the privacy regulations are all responses to the lax approaches that we've taken in the past as a market as a whole. And so it's almost like it's a reset right now. And I truly believe we'll come out of this stronger. It'll make all of us better. Publisher, advertiser, agency, ad tech, everyone. We're going to come out more strategic and respectful of who we're advertising to in the future. And pubs should be especially optimistic here because it's opening unique opportunities for us when we're reaching for the same dollars as the duopoly.
Right, that's a really good point. I think browsers and global legislation are just not backing down on privacy at the moment. So, anything involving tracking users across the web or trading user identities is just not a feasible long-term solution because they're just going to get shut down. We feel that the only sustainable way forward is to rebuild things and do so in a way that is completely respectful of user privacy, which, is how it really should have been all along. We had a similar sentiment to yours, Josh, this time from Dwayne Thompson at OMD on the buy side, saying that all of these things are enhancements that we're making to police a better internet overall, which I think is a really nice thought.
I completely agree. This is all very good for the long-term health of the internet.
Right. As part of that better internet, though, we're going to need consistent data quality, and third-party data just does not have the best reputation. We spoke to Don Perkins at Immediate Media, and he explained to us that third-party segments can be made up of anything, and it's really not transparent. Josh, you're quite openly in agreement about this, but how did you actually reach this conclusion?
Well, I've always been at least a little bit suspicious of how these segments were being built and put together. And then about 4 years ago, I was asked to speak at the Los Angeles Digital Summit. And I chose to do my presentation on the power of first party audiences. And part of my presentation was going to the Blue Kai registry, pulling up my profile and showing it to the crowd. Looking at it, it said that I was a 50-plus-year-old female CEO making 35 to 40,000 a year and wanted to buy a BMW. So none of that was even remotely close. And then we looked further as the group expanded the profile, and when we looked through it, it showed that I was basically in every single targeting group you can imagine, which explains why I get so many ads to me that are served in Spanish or for products I'd never have any interest or use for, or any of the other interesting targets that I see sent my way.
Right, Spanish, that makes no sense. That's kind of made me want to check out my own profile now, so maybe I'll do that after this. Anyway, Josh, you'd also identified some knock-on effects in terms of modeling from third-party data providers. What exactly did you see?
Sure. One of the issues I've had ever since starting in this industry 14 years ago were the black box algorithms these third parties employ to build their segments. I've never remembered filling out a survey or form to give them this information. So how was it collected? Like these are questions I had since the beginning. And the more I learned, the more suspicious I got. Little things didn't always add up totally. And sometimes you'll get answers where it's like panels of a couple thousand are modeled out to millions. So you start wondering just how accurate that is. There's some shady collection methods out there. And but more often than not, you get replies of, oh, we can't tell you that, it's proprietary, which I always felt was a little like picking up a can of soup in the grocery store and under the ingredients, it just says proprietary. Like, how are you supposed to fully trust that you're buying even soup? So, but if you make your own soup, then you know exactly what's in it.
Right, I actually really like that analogy, Josh. I think you're actually onto something. Maybe you can actually make your own soup trending for publishers. But seriously though, it sounds like there's a gap in the market for trusted seed data. And publishers can actually fill that because they have a direct first-party relationship with the users. And I feel like this is just one of many new exciting opportunities that we see for publishers to be at the center of a brand new ecosystem. Of course, as long as they future-proof for like privacy and data strategy. Speaking of data strategy, Josh, you and BuzzFeed have done some pretty impressive things with first-party data. Would you tell us about it?
Sure. Currently, we're working really hard on pushing our first-party audiences as much as possible. It's not always possible. There are always things we can't fully cover. But on the whole, we've been looking at how we can build audiences similar to some of the third parties that we've relied on in the past. And, there's a lot of opportunities there for us with the audiences being cheaper than third parties. We have more control over things. We can customize the offerings for clients. And we've actually started moving so much over that 2 of our third-party vendors have reached out recently and asked why we're not using them as much. And we've also started moving our PMP and PG deals even more into into first party, and we're about roughly 80% moved and using our first party segments. And we're working to continue to increase that across everything that we do and increase that first party usage.
Wow, okay, that's really great. It's great that you're innovating and pushing ahead so well, but how are you dealing with those media buyers who are still determined to forge ahead with third-party data despite its short shelf life?
We have a frank discussion. Sometimes It's unavoidable because there are definitely segments we can't recreate. There's data we definitely don't have. And in those situations, we are working with some third parties, but it's a very cherry-picked list of ones that we've talked to and know more about. But on the whole, we sit down and we talk to the publisher or to the advertisers see what they need, see if there's something we can do internally. And when possible, we'll offer up a similar first party to the third party that they're requesting, and we'll A/B test them on performance, and then report to the client and ourselves and continue that discussion.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good approach. We heard from Immediate Media as well that they solve for buyer reluctance in these areas by creating really open discussion as well on problems with third-party data. And they also put a lot of extra effort into selling quality offerings into the agencies that they speak to. Right, now I think it's time to think a little bit about private marketplaces. We identified in our research in early 2019 that 66% of publishers had moved at least some inventory from open marketplaces to private in the preceding year. Josh, you obviously witnessed that trend as well, but did you see it change as we moved through 2019 and into 2020?
Yep, it's continued to move in that direction, and I think it's great for both parties. The advertiser gets more insight and better quality control. The publisher gets higher CPMs than open market. It's a win-win, and I think the trend will continue. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't.
Yeah, that's great. Some publishers did, however, report finding barriers to entry, and the buy side gave us some insight here. Group M told us that publishers really need to demonstrate clear data-driven value for them to consider a private marketplace deal. And OMD also explained that strictly curated inventory on the open marketplace was a key part of their strategy. I think this and other similar feedback really strongly indicated to us that publisher conversations with agencies need to uncover real solid goals and also be very prescriptive in addressing buyer needs to justify these private partnerships. How do you actually approach these situations, Josh?
We're handling these scenarios case by case. We have some long-standing partners that we want to move forward with, and most of them have moved forward. Some of our long-standing partners are bigger clients, but we have some newer clients or some smaller clients that haven't done too much in the past. That or they're just dipping into programmatic with us, and so they're looking at open first. But right now, it's all a conversation. We are setting up tests, we're showing studies, and we talk to them and work with them, look at their goals, how we can approach it better with PMPs or PG deals. So yeah, it's still the same as some of the others. Just have a conversation and see what we can do about it.
You're right, I completely agree. Like, conversation is super important. Media buyers are not going to forge deals unless they understand the quality and the value or the potential applications of the data. With that in mind, we dove a little bit deeper into the things that agencies want to see and how publishers can better articulate their value. The feedback we got was pretty clear. Buyers actually do want stronger, more strategic relationships with publishers, which includes the ability to both align with relevant brands and also communicate data relevance back to the buyer. This quote from Group M really says it all, but does this actually match your experience, Josh?
Definitely. We have plenty of standard segments we offer that clients like and buy repeatedly, but we also customize when needed. We try our best to be fast and flexible and understand their goals, and the best way for us to fit into that larger picture that Max mentioned.
Right, it's amazing to see that kind of publisher proactivity. It definitely goes both ways though. OMD explained to us that communication and understanding is a dual responsibility. And Group M explained to us that publishers sometimes end up having to make recommendations blindly because there's a gap between how the buy and sell sides engage with each other. Group M said that they place value in giving publishers more insight for this reason, and that's a good sign. On that note, buyers were open about also wanting transparency. Essentially, buyers want publishers to help them trust the data that's on offer. Would you agree with that, Josh?
Completely. We've received an increase in data questionnaires and RFIs, which is great. We're fully transparent with how we build our audiences, and if it doesn't fit what the client is looking for, we work to build something that does and customize that when we can. I think transparency is a good selling point for publishers.
Right, and a key point we heard from OMD was that deeper detail around data offerings could prompt a larger spend from them. So that's something to remember. Group M explained to us that understanding the nuances in publisher data was incredibly important because the unique data sets publishers can provide are so valuable. There are lots of advertisers out there that are relying on publishers to find their core audiences.
I agree. I think this is the perfect time for publishers, agencies, and brands to have these conversations. It's good for all of us.
It really is. Okay, Josh, we've talked about things like first-party data strategy and setting up for privacy in the future. And we've also talked about providing buyers with data insights. But really, all of this is easier said than done without the right tools and the right go-to-market approach. Your success has been pretty evident for you when it comes to things like RFP responses, but how did you reach this point?
Yeah, one of the biggest things for us has been our DMP. 2 years ago, my team and I did a deep analysis into what was happening in closed loss notes inside BuzzFeed. We noticed certain themes around data and usage and a couple other things as well. So we were able to bucket it all up into different categories and do a deep dive into why these things were happening. Some of it was a perception thing, some was a process thing, and what was going on and why it was. We started really digging deep on that. A couple of these processes and perceptions we were able to work on in tandem while addressing some of the larger issues, which for us was a missing piece of tech. So which is the DMP. And the DMP we had at the time, it was put into place years before we had decided to do this. And it really hadn't evolved with us as a publisher, and it was not addressing our needs in the way that we had evolved over the years. And it really wasn't helping us to relate to clients, and wasn't helping us to be able to check the yes bucks on some of the RFPs that were coming in for certain executions. And so we started looking into the tech, and over the course of 8 months, we went through and interviewed the top 15 DMPs in the market. We sent out a massive 42 question RFI that was broken into 8 categories, and we started digging really deep into the market. And we had to do all of this while keeping an eye on things like GDPR and CCPA and the world without third-party cookies. And so a lot of these different factors played into our decisions as we were going through it. Slowly we narrowed it down to 5, and then from 5 to 3, and then to 2, and then down to 1. And the one that we chose for a proof of concept was Permutive. And then we ran a really in-depth 30-day proof of concept to really figure it out and make sure that everyone was okay with it, and that everyone saw the value, and everyone was, all the different groups that were going to be involved had a vote to say yes. So everything worked out. We ended up onboarding Permutive to take care of the tech side. And at that point, we'd also done a lot of internal training and process and things to fix some of the others. And that became a really big turning point for us to actually work with a DMP partner who actually aligned with our needs and the publisher market as a whole, and have something that was really tailor-made for the needs that we as publishers have. So it was quite a long journey, but worth it now that we're here.
I'm glad to hear it. How is BuzzFeed approaching this all-important topic of privacy in terms of tooling?
That was a very important factor for us when we selected our new DMP. It was one of the major portions in that 42 question RFI that we sent out. We were asking about GDPR, which was at the time the big one, and now the big one is CCPA, which we're working through. But privacy compliance was first and foremost one of the things we needed to look at. We knew it was going to be an increasing importance throughout the industry. So we wanted to make sure that that was addressed during that process. And quite a few of the DMPs in our RFI didn't seem to really have it all together there, and they didn't seem to be moving fast enough on it. And when we were doing this with our legal counsel was involved at the time as well, so they could help us kind of know what questions and things to look for. And we made sure that the one we were going to onboard was going to pass muster with our internal GDPR working group that we had put together. And we had them look at everything from, how Permutive was handling it, some of the other were handling it. And everyone who was part of the interview process was trying to figure out who and was going to be compliant, how it was going to work together. Because, we're a global company, and we didn't want to invest in something that was going to be tough or wasn't already compliant or anything like that. It really weighed heavily in our decision. It does daily when we think of CCPA and the other regulations that are coming throughout the rest of this year. And we just wanted to make sure that you have a really good tech partner that's just as invested in all of this as you are.
Right. The fear of fines and other fallout from privacy non-compliance means that there's a need for quality consented data. And some great advice that we had from OMD was that publishers should take advantage by promoting first-party data and its compliance. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a feather in our cap, and it should be a big motivator for publishers to be as compliant as possible.
Right, I completely agree. Take every advantage that you have, basically. So here we are. We're at the business end of the webinar. From our research and conversations, we've summarized 7 core steps to increasing data-driven ad revenue. Josh, given some of your success in each of these areas, it would be really great to hear your top pieces of advice for our listeners.
Great, let's go.
Cool. First up, we think it's really important for publishers to focus on their first-party data advantage and take control of their own destiny by setting themselves up as like a first-party data business that's well differentiated.
Yes, as the only one with a direct relationship with users, publishers are an important source of quality first-party data and that we can leverage. This is a strategic advantage for us and can help us reshape the market.
Yeah, I really agree. I think it's historically been really difficult for publishers to differentiate their offerings in the sea of third-party data of varying quality that's been out there. And it's really time for that to change. Mm-hmm. Okay, secondly, publishers should shout about the benefits of their quality consented data being safer because no buyer wants a fine for non-compliance.
100%. Privacy is driving change for everyone. It has serious implications for those who don't comply. It's also another potential strategic advantage over third parties for publishers.
Right. Thirdly, education for buyers is important to allow you to move away from the third-party data status quo.
Yes, the industry is changing fast, and if you spend your time looking for hacks and workarounds, you're just wasting time. Google and Apple have massive resources, and they'll fix any holes very quickly. It's a better use of your time to understand the new framework and how to work smarter within it. Also, train your sales teams to articulate what's happening in the market and how to differentiate your own offerings. Your first-party data is definitely your most valuable asset.
Good advice. Now for the next point. It's important when justifying private and direct deals to demonstrate value and alignment and really be prescriptive to meet buyer goals.
Sure. The closer your relationship and the more you can communicate, the better the results are. You can figure out the best audiences for their goals and how to continually refine what they're looking for based on mutual feedback.
Right. A really important one next. You've got to understand and communicate your data in detail if you want people to literally buy into it.
Yep. Work with your sales teams to communicate the nuances and potential applications. Be sure to include first-party data in RFP responses. Lean into your differentiators. Niche fits can be of really great value. Keep experimenting with your data to find new audiences to leverage and push for clarity from buyers on how they're buying and also their KPIs. So your recommendation can be as relevant as possible.
Right. And to build trust, you're going to have to provide data set clarity and transparency.
Yep, by providing transparency and clarity about data set composition and communicating campaign insights, you can build that crucial trust. Have the right tools and the right people to derive the information you need for in this is vital.
Right, transparency really is important. We heard from media buyers in the research that demographic data was seen as really strong and in demand, but this was actually only because there was so much ambiguity around the composition and the relevance of interest and intent data. So, if you as a publisher can give clarity into those different data types, you can drive demand across the board. And our last step towards data-driven ad revenue is to set yourself up for long-term success with the right data platforms and tools.
It's truly essential to have the right tools. Without them, you're wasting time and effort trying to hack semi-functional tech together to try and get what you need. It's also important to have a tech partner that's as obsessed with things like browser restrictions, changing privacy regulations, and just essentially the constantly shifting marketplace that we're in. If you're focused on the future, you need to have a partner who's focused on the future as well. If you're trying to figure out in-the-minute workarounds versus how to work together through the coming changes, you're just going to be stuck in a constant state of panic. It's massively important if you're investing in tech to have a partner that's looking forward to the future and what changes are coming. It's really helpful because it also makes the conversations you have with that partner much more productive, and you can learn a lot from each other that way.
That's right, Josh. Publishers have a massive opportunity if they play their cards right. It's really, really important for them to use privacy forward tools that will help them scale and target their full audiences and set them up for the privacy first future that's undoubtedly almost here. So we've come to the end of our recommendations. We hope they're helpful, and I have to say a huge thank you to Josh for his valuable insights.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Brilliant. Thank you both for that discussion. There was so much advice in there. But now we've got time for questions, and you could submit these via the questions tab, but let's start with some we've already had in. Josh, this one is for you, and it's: what was BuzzFeed looking for when you assessed DMPs for privacy compliance?
Sure, we were looking for someone who had both a clear perspective and a clear action plan on regulations that were already in place and the ones that were coming. We wanted to know that they were as focused on it as we were and were as excited to talk about it as we were. And so it made it so those conversations were very productive, and it was good to hear each other's perspectives and needs.
Brilliant, thanks. And next one is: what is BuzzFeed focusing on next? What are your top concerns around market changes or challenges to overcome?
Sure, we're working on redoing the narrative on our first party data. We've taken some of the feedback that we've received from clients, and we're working on something that is even more market friendly, and we're working on ways to work better with our sales teams, better with our programmatic teams, and how we can actually work together through all of these challenges a little bit better. Some of the concerns that we're worried about are pretty much the same as everyone else. We're continually watching the browser restrictions. We're watching privacy regulations and seeing where things changing. How are the different states that have pending legislation going to change? So we're keeping an eye on all of that and how it's going to affect our own first party data strategy. And that's where we're spending a lot of time these days is figuring that out and keeping our eye on it.
Great. I think everyone will be happy to hear that, everyone's in the same boat here, and their challenges are also, mirroring yours. The next one, I think, can be answered by both of you. So what needs to happen for first party data to become the currency for online display advertising?
Actually, let Alexandra go first.
Sure, okay. I think there are a few things here, actually. I think publishers are going to need to just push their offerings really proactively, as we've discussed today. And buyers are going to need to be able to trust that. So obviously publishers are going to have to make that effort as well. We've heard today of all of the success that you can have if you actually manage to do that well. Part of the trust that buyers need is going to come from better defined offerings, which publishers can, of course, do themselves, but would also be helped massively by adopting things like, common audience taxonomy, like that within the data transparency standards. That kind of thing would take the ambiguity out of everything. I think the industry is also at some point going to have to really let go of the idea of third-party facilitated user identity across domains, because it's being shut down and it's just not going to fly in this new age of privacy. So once that acceptance is reached and the richness of first-party data is understood and appreciated, we're going to be well on our way.
I completely agree with everything Alexandra just said. It's really going to be hinging on our ability to package it, sell it, and talk about it in a way that makes sense to the advertisers and to the buyers and the media agencies out there, and also working with them to find out what their goals are and how we can address that in a way that benefits both parties. So yeah, I agree with all of that.
Great. And this next question feeds into that a little bit more, Josh. So do you build your audience segments according to sales demand, or are you being proactive in creating data audience offerings first?
Both. There are a lot of things that we create proactively. There's a lot of segments that we've built, and most of that's based around the core of BuzzFeed and where we as a company and as a publisher, and we actually work through everything with our daily publishing, our core ability to reach specific audiences and topics, and so we really focus on those. but then we also listen to all of our clients and what are they looking for. And as we see trends coming in from RFPs and everyone else, we will adjust accordingly. And we'll also build custom offerings for clients when they ask for them.
Great, that's good to hear. We've got a few questions in about whether the steps and the stats will be available post-webinar. Just to say, yes, they will. You get both the report and the webinar in your inbox. The next one, Alexandra and Josh, I think you can both have a bit to say on this. From decision time, how long did it take for you to get the full DMP implementation in place?
For us, it took quite a while, just because we had some hurdles along the way. But for full implementation, because we did the proof of concept back in November of 2018. After the proof of concept, we had the contract negotiations, everything throughout December, and then we started the rollout in early January of 2019, and then that rolled out through the US by about early February. We were fully deployed in the US. But because we were really we were being very conservative about how we were approaching GDPR. And so we actually kept it geofenced within the US for most of 2019. So we didn't do a full global rollout until Q4 of 2019. And that was all based around, we were doing a lot of in-depth DPIAs, working with our InfoSec teams to really understand all the nuances and how we were going to do it. We also needed to have all the compliance. We had to have all the privacy stuff in place. We also had to have all the policies in place for our global teams of how they can use audiences, what they can build, what they can't build, etc. And so for us, in that really conservative, staggered approach, it took us through the end of Q4 to just get to that global state. But the initial rollout in the US was actually fairly quick.
Great. And Alexandra, anything to add on that?
Sure, yeah. From a Permutive perspective, in terms of implementation time, it really varies from customer to customer, depending on what each customer actually needs, which we keep very much in tune with. We've done implementations as fast as a few days for some customers with very specific needs, and especially agile teams. We have longer implementations for those customers who need it as well. But the most important thing for us, the most important thing, is helping our customers get everything they need from Permutive. So when we implement, that's what we care about. We have incredibly talented solutions architects, and we have an exceptional customer success team, and they all put all of their energy into helping customers succeed. And that process doesn't end after implementation. Our teams continue to work with customers on an ongoing basis to help them get the most of the DMP and succeed with strategy as well.
Great. Just a couple more now before we close. Josh, what was the biggest challenge for your organization to fully benefit from the implementation of Permutive?
That's a great question. So the biggest challenge that we've had to fully benefit was really that full implementation, that full rollout. We were able to start getting some really good smaller wins pretty quickly because of the way that we approached it with an in-depth proof of concept. Everybody already had kind of the ideas of where they were going to be going with this, and all the individual teams that were involved already had perspective. So we were able to get some good wins pretty quickly. But for us, really, to gain the full benefit of everything really came by the time we hit that global rollout, which, you know, that was the hurdle. There was just us being very conservative with our privacy and protection, and really wanting to make sure that we did it right the first time.
Great, thank you for sharing that. There's been a lot of advice in this webinar so far, so I want to take the last question just to give listeners, you know, one last piece of advice. Josh, if you were to give one, what would that be? Alexandra as well.
Sure. The one piece of advice I would give is to embrace the changes that are happening, because they're not going to unchange, and you're going to just waste time trying to skirt around them. Just focus your energies and efforts on figuring out how to work within the changing regulations and the browser restrictions and the marketplace that we're in right now, and also identify partners who are doing the same. Because if you're working with partners who are also focusing on going and working within the changes rather than skirting around them, it's going to be a much more productive and mutually beneficial partnership.
Great. Alexandra?
Yeah, I really agree with that. Embrace change. I like that. I think publishers have an opportunity, as we've outlined, but it really is a limited time opportunity. I think Chrome has fired a starting gun with their announcement in January, and pretty much everyone in the industry is now scrambling to either give themselves the upper hand or to recreate the third-party dominance that has actually been fed by publisher data for the longest time. So it would really be ideal at this point if publishers who are the actual source of great data and have the legal right to use it could be the beneficiaries here. But I think that's only going to happen if publishers move fast and build themselves up to fill this data gap that's opening up. Naturally, media buyers too will benefit from the availability of quality data if they accept the change. So I think all of this is really a chance for things to get better. So yeah, embrace change would be my advice for today.
Brilliant. We'll wrap there. Thank you so much for joining this webinar and all of the discussion points and advice that we've had so far. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and submitting questions. If you have any more questions or you want to learn any more about the topics and the reports that we've covered today, you can send an email to hello@permutive.com. But for now, thanks again and have a great rest of the day.